Everyone knows that stress is incredibly bad for you, and sometimes it's unavoidable. That being said, sometimes the best way to deal with stress is to avoid it entirely. Again, easier said than done. Pruning stress out of your life isn't so simple, but it requires you to make some small changes, and in some cases, depending on who you are and where you're at in life, big changes. But there's no better way for your life and for your health than to make those changes. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the most common sources of stress that I've found and see if I can't show you some solutions to get the stress out of your life, to lower the stress that's in your life. And I realize that everyone's life is different. Some people have huge health stresses, while for others it might be all about the money or their career. Truthfully, for most of us, it's some combination of them all. Now, whatever your major stresses are in life, I hope that seeing how to eliminate these particular issues can be applied to your own life by watching this video. Number one, prune out bad people. I know it's fairly obvious, and we all know someone we'd label a bad influence, and that person who, whether they're well-intentioned or not, is really just a drain on your life and energy levels, right? Perhaps you can't avoid them. They can corner you or won't let you get away. Maybe they are just filled to the full with negativity, continually dumping it on you. Now, maybe it's just a perfectly normal and nice person that just happens to rub you the wrong way every time you run into them. Whatever the case is for you, your bad person can be a real source of stress. Learning how to deal with them will make a dramatic difference for your health. And I mean, this is fairly straightforward. You know this. Now, set boundaries, set limits. Whoever you're dealing with and in whatever capacity, remember that your health and your time is your own. And there's absolutely no reason you have to let someone else own your time. If you aren't dealing with a recurring pattern, you can find a polite reason to excuse yourself from a conversation, like visiting the restroom or making a phone call. But if this is a problem that happens continually, you must have a pointed discussion with this person about your limits and your boundaries, and be direct. If talking about your needs doesn't work, then you can also give strong social signals, like limiting your eye contact or your body language, changing it up in such a way that it reflects, moving away from the person or disinterest in some way. Just angle your body away. Giving short, simple answers usually hits home for those stress-causing people, giving them that hint of what's going on and that maybe continuing to talk and interact with you isn't working out. Now, you've already told them that you don't have the energy, the time, the interest right now, so don't feel bad in showing them that very thing in your behavior. Try ignoring them. Sad to say, but again, we're trying to go through steps and stages here to get the point across, and ignoring them does work. The reality is that sometimes a person just can't take a hint, they can't get the point that you're sending out, and you just can't escape their presence. Or sometimes, this can happen a lot, someone you love needs support or attention, but more than you can emotionally handle in that moment. In those moments, it's perfectly okay to emotionally step back. You can still participate in the conversation, interaction, but you don't have to fully engage. In fact, you might discover the stress dripping away if you stop focusing on what the person is saying or doing, and instead you might feel sympathy just for the circumstances that they're facing that drove them to this overbearing, energy-draining state. Or just simply go over your grocery list. You get the point. It's just that because someone's talking to you, that doesn't mean you owe them your undivided attention if you've made it clear that they're asking too much of you. In most cases, the person just wants to dump on you anyway. You're nothing more than a convenient excuse not to work it out for themselves. So, disengage those moments entirely or selectively engage based on where you're at and what you can handle. Your health is worth every step you take towards relieving stress. Number two, prune your commuting. There isn't a person on the planet that likes sitting in traffic. The average American spends 51 minutes a day or 204 hours a year sitting in their vehicle for work. That might sound like it's only a simple annoyance, but it's actually much worse than you think because commutes increase anxiety. Yep, the longer the commute, the greater the effects, the potential effects nonetheless, anxiety has on you. Now, naturally, commuting increases your blood pressure, particularly if you're dealing with lots of good old traffic. And yes, some of that is probably attributable to, related health risks like sitting still for too long. And some of it is surely related to the stress of the commute and the increased anxiety and the heart risks that come together. The bottom line is, though, that if you're commuting every day, it's almost certainly inserting stress into your life to some degree that's not good for you. And even if you aren't commuting daily, the times you do end up behind the wheel may be stressful only because you're out of practice. You're not used to doing what you would do if you were driving every single day to work. Now, not to worry though, there are things you can do to cut down commuting stress as well. You can work from home. Some jobs require office time, but only a select few require you to be in the office all the time. See if the company you own or work for will let you work from home 1 or 2 days each week. Working from home is it's good for overall productivity, number one. It saves on costs for your place of work, and it relieves the stress of your commute. It's a win-win for everyone, and thankfully, more and more jobs are encouraging it. Try taking Uber. If you've got a tricky drive and you aren't too far from work, Uber is a wonderful stress reliever. It doesn't cost very much less than a taxi anyway. Let the Uber driver deal with the stress of the commute. Or you can try changing your work hours. Believe it or not, when you do have to go into the office, it's amazing how even 15 minutes can make a difference. By stepping out of the common 9 to 5 or the 8 to 4 rush, you can avoid the stress of heavy traffic while saving commuting time. Yes, I know that your job may not allow such changes, but many other jobs will allow you to arrive at 7 and leave at 3, or if you arrive at 10 and go home at 6, and different sort of hourly allocations of when you go to work and when you step away from work. And those sorts of seemingly insignificant changes, because some of you may be thinking, well, that's insignificant, but it can save you hours on the road along with immeasurable amounts of stress due to heavy traffic. Change how you get to work. Try taking public transit once or twice a week. By doing so, you'll avoid the stress of driving at least some of the time. Try walking or biking. Again, it's worth doing at least some of the time if you can, for obvious health reasons in addition to that, because you're getting some exercise from that now. And yes, all of those other modes of transport come with their own stresses, but changing up your routine can at least keep one type of stress from growing and eventually becoming a health problem for you. Or maybe you can change where you live. If you've got to be in the office at 9 every single day, then where you work, it's got to be considered because it's tied to where you live. Remember, the longer your commute, the more potential you have for stress. If you're driving too much each week, it's worth it for your quality of life, along with your health, to look for a place to live that's closer to the office. Now, this may sound crazy. I get it. Agree. In some cases, it may be, depending on who you are and what your situation is. But it's hard to ignore and overlook just how damaging a long commute can be for your health. Not to mention how much time you lose when you've got to a commute that takes many hours out of your week. 1 hour to work and 1 hour home is 2 hours per day multiplied by the number of days per week. And that's ouch. That's a lot of time. And your time is your most precious commodity, and it's well worth protecting along with your health. Change your job if you must. If none of what I've suggested works for you, then it's worth asking if your job really works for you either. Of course, my advice won't be applicable to everybody, and I understand that. It's just to give you some ideas, but far too many people forget to factor in their commute time and quality of life when deciding where to work. Or they just simply glaze over it. Most of us will have numerous jobs throughout our lives, and most jobs aren't rigidly tied to inaccessible locations with inflexible hours. All you got to do is ask. The stresses that come along with your job might indeed be secondary to the important things you do or the fulfillment you get, but if that isn't the case, give your health a high priority. Keep it up there as number one. There's no reason to stick with a job that's hurting you in more ways than one. And third, prune your commitments. Most people find it very hard to say no to others by setting boundaries and limits. That leads to burnout, though, whether at work or in your everyday life. Thankfully, there's a simple solution to this third source of stress. I call it the switchback. Instead of answering yes by default, make your default answer no, unless it's something you really want to do or need to do. Voila, right? It sounds simple, and it really is, but it's not easy, and it does require that you change your mindset. You're not a bad person for saying no. So start with a little no's and work your way up. If someone asks you for a small favor, politely tell them no. If you're invited out for the third weekend in a row, tell them that you need a weekend to yourself. It will feel awkward at first, but you and your health are worth it. Trust me when I say that once you get used to it, you'll find that it's quite freeing. It's amazing how much freedom it brings. And steering back to the point of this video, you'll feel a release of stress that you didn't even realize you were allowing in your life. It's not possible to cut all the stresses out of your life, and I realize that. But in doing so, if you did cut out all the stresses, of course, you'd be very alone. But not all stress is necessary. The better you are at cutting out the stress, the happier and healthier you'll be. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I do truly wish you all the best in your journey of health.